Now, I'm really milking this game. I didn't do one, not two, not three. Yes, this is my fourth video on Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. And it took nearly 5 years to the date in the making, so let me catch you up. I played the demo of Age of Calamity back when it released, and it was terrible. It was also one of the first videos I remember getting some hate on. Then, in 2023, I played it before Tears of the Kingdom release, and I was hoping that it would be in some way fixed, and maybe, just maybe, that there were a few patches that improved it slightly, but it was still terrible. It looked like a smudge, had terrible pop-in, and consistently ran under 30 FPS. Then, finally the Switch 2 came out and everyone was interested in Tears of the Kingdom or Mario Kart World in 60 FPS, and right up on that list for me was Age of Calamity to see if that extra power would do anything. And it did, but it still looked terrible. It was finally a stable 30F and it was playable, and I put around 10 hours into it and then I put it down hoping for a 60 FPS update, but unfortunately, it didn't come. So with Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment right around the corner, I finally decided to beat Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity in 2025. And in some ways, I love it. In others, it's a bit goofy, but it also gives us a Zelda experience like no other, which is my favourite thing about it. So let's start with the obvious. Age of Calamity was basically held hostage by the Switch. This was a game that wanted to be chaotic with loads of explosions and hundreds of enemies and bokoblins and particle effects and flashy special attacks, but the Switch hardware, it just couldn't keep up. And despite what the comments on the other videos would say, that's not me nitpicking, because there were plenty of comments of people saying, oh, back in our day, we just called it slowdown and got on with it. But when every single fight feels like a slideshow, it stops being this crazy power fantasy, and it honestly just turns into like a test of your own patience, because every dodge or every combo, it just felt like it was being run through a blender or something. It was really, really bad. But now, on the Switch 2, it's finally stable. It's not perfect, it still does drop, but it is stable. And the fact that I could play through a full battle without the frame rate tanking to the teens makes it feel like a completely different game. It's still not pretty. This game is still very ugly, and there's still loads of pop-in, and the jagged edges are really, really apparent. But I would take it looking like a smudge on the screen rather than it stuttering any day of the week. And here's the thing, I think 5 years on now, I can finally say that I have actually played Age of Calamity, because even when I played it all them years back, I could never fully commit myself to it. There was always some performance issue that was getting in the way, that was ruining my immersion, that was just slowing me down. But now I'm playing it the way it was actually meant to be played, because when it runs well, it actually clicks and the combat starts to make sense. And that's when the special sauce of what this game really is shines through. You have all the unique characters with unique abilities and weapons. You have the breadth of the wildness that this game is just coated in. You have these amazing cutscenes that I can finally appreciate, because I knew the second I got out of this cutscene, I would be watching a slideshow. And that's it. Muso games are just like a guilty pleasure. They are switch your brain off, kill hundreds of enemies, and just have a great time. And on this channel, which you should subscribe to by the way, I've done really deep dive breakdowns of games and went into their mechanics and their game design and all this sort of stuff. And honestly, and I know this sort of sounds like a cop-out, but I kind of feel if you do that with a Muso game, you're almost missing the point. It's supposed to just be absolute chaos. It's not supposed to be the deepest thing in the world. It's also not supposed to be the hardest thing in the world, which Dynasty Warriors Origins, the game was quite tough. Age of Calamity just makes all this chaos work. And I really appreciated that after I played Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition earlier on the year. Yes, that game looks, 1080p in handheld, runs at 60 FPS. It's fantastic. But the second you play Age of Calamity, you'll notice the improvements immediately. And the biggest one, which might actually sound small, is how the stunned state works on enemies. Because in the Definitive Edition, when an enemy is going into their stun state, they will finish their attack animation, or you will dodge them, or whatever you do. And then there will be a second where the little pie chart doesn't show up, so you have to wait around. And if you hit them before that pie chart shows up, then it will never show up, and then they won't be stunned anymore. But in Age of Calamity, the second you do a perfect dodge, or you use one of the Sheikah Slate abilities to stun the enemy, the stun state pops up instantly, and then you can just start wailing on them. And it genuinely seems like such a small thing, but in a game that is all about chaos and mashing buttons and executing combos, that little second makes a massive difference to how you practically play the game. And that feel carries over to everything, because now that the game has a stable frame rate, you can do things like the perfect dodge into a flurry rush. It's way easier to activate your Sheikah Slate abilities on time. It's way easier to dodge enemies, to use your bow to be able to hit their weak points so then they will be stunned. It's just all of those little slight improvements just make this game so much better than what Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition was. And another thing that was really apparent going from game to game was that the missions in Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition, the maps were very grid-like, very samey, even though obviously they look different, they had different enemies. Whereas in Age of Calamity, they feel like battlefields. They don't feel like they're maps, which is a strange thing to say, but I hope you understand what I mean by that. This feels like a place where a battle is going to take place. It doesn't feel like a place that was built for a battle to take place, if you understand where I'm coming from. And the Muso game will be complete with a massive roster of characters that are just really, really fun to play, and it's the best part of the whole experience. Because my experience with other Warriors games, it is fairly limited, but from what I remember of playing Dynasty Warriors back on the PS2, is that most characters felt like slight variation. You had the guy on a horse with a spear, you had the guy on the horse with a sword, you had the guy on the ground with a sword, you had a guy with a bigger sword, those kind of characters. Whereas here, everyone plays completely different with a unique play style, and it's not just how they look or the weapons they use, but in their mechanics. And it's great that every character has the same combo, so you're not constantly thinking, oh, well, this character needs a heavy, heavy, light, and this character needs heavy, light, heavy, and you're sort of bouncing around different characters. Every single character has 2 light attacks, 1 heavy, that's a certain move. 3 light attacks, 1 heavy, that's a certain move. And it makes switching between the characters simple, but then the characters have enough differences and depth so that when you dive into them, you just have so much fun trying to understand, oh, well, if I have a big group of enemies, this is the one I want to do with Link. And if I have a big group of enemies and I'm playing as Hestu, this is the attack I want to do. And I kind of feel like there's a character for everybody. Like, there are certain characters that I didn't like playing as in this game. I didn't like playing as Zelda. I liked Impa, but not too much. I didn't really like Urbosa. But then when you start to get into, like, Rivali, he's really cool with his bow. Link, obviously my favorite. And then Daruk was a character I really didn't think I was going to play, because usually those sort of big bulky characters I have no interest in. But Daruk's abilities were just so fun, summoning the magma pillars and then blowing them up. My favorite by an absolute long shot was Hestu, because one, playing as Hestu is just hilarious, and just listening to his voice, it's so dumb. But all of his abilities are just really fun and playful. He always summons the Koroks to do random things. And my favorite one was that Hestu has this ability where he summons a Korok leaf and rides on it like it's a skateboard. But then the little Korok sort of saplings pop up, and if you go into them, I think they increase your damage on your attacks. And that was just such a fun attack to use. And then later on, and I guess spoiler alert for a game that's been out for 5 years, when you unlock the current, not champions, but the current, descendants of the champions, when they come back and you get to play as Yunobu, he was just perfect because he had the speed and the roll around of Daruk. He also had the big heavy hitting attacks, but then his special was eating the food, which would either give him a damage or a defense buff. And the fact that these characters aren't just like, this is a guy with a sword and this is a guy with a spear, just made it so much more fun and interesting to play whenever a new character came up. I was genuinely excited. And I know these games are usually loved for their massive rosters, but this game doesn't have, like, it has a big roster, but it's not absolutely ginormous that you kind of lose yourself. It feels like you can genuinely use every single character if you really like, or you can just stick with your favorite characters, use the same 3 or 4 characters throughout the campaign, which realistically is what I did. And one thing that I really like to look at with games is like the economy and how it's balanced, because it is something that very few games get right. If I could ever work in a game studio, that would be where I would love to be, like game economies and balancing it and all this sort of stuff. I just find it fascinating. And Age of Calamity really understands the economy, because as I was going along, I was using the same 3 or 4 characters. It was mostly, say, Rivali, Link, Hestu, Daruk, and then Yunobu whenever I unlocked him. That was my sort of roster, and Rivali kind of fell out of favor because I didn't like him as much as Daruk. But I was, upgrading their weapons, and then I was also power leveling them up at the barracks to be able to keep them all roughly the same level. And in doing that, I felt like I was constantly rewarded. I was constantly upgrading my characters, but I was always struggling with money. Like, I never really had anything more than 10, 15, 20,000 rupees. And if I wanted to power level up to do the next sort of story mission, where I say I had to level up the Daruk 4 times, and I wanted to upgrade his weapon, and I wanted to upgrade the Master Sword or something for Link, I would always be left with only a couple of thousand rupees. I never ran into a situation where I just had so much money, because usually in most games, you start off and the economy is quite strict. You might be struggling with money. You see this in Fallout, in any real RPG, full stop. where you start off, you don't really have enough money to buy weapons, you kind of have to scavenge and pick up weapons from enemies and all this sort of stuff. But then usually by, realistically, like the halfway mark in a lot of games, money is completely obsolete, because you either have so much of it that you could just buy anything, or you realize that the things that you can buy are actually just useless, so there's no point in even having the money. Or you might have figured out a farming method so that you can just get almost unlimited money if you really want to put the time in. Whereas here, there might be a good farming method, I'm not sure, but I didn't really see one jump out at me. And I like that, because I always had money in the game, but I never had enough money just to blindly upgrade every single character and power level every single character. So it really felt like I grew with my characters instead of almost like doing it as a power level. Like, let's say I just used Link to farm a load of money, and then I was like, oh, I just want to level up the Rook without actually using them. Whereas in here, because I didn't actually have that much money, I did always feel like I was consistently swapping out between characters that I wanted to use so that they would all be roughly the same level. I mean, you see an example of this in like modern Pokemon games, where with XP share, even though I do like XP share, you will always end up using like your most powerful, maybe your starter, or you got like a pseudo legendary or something. And you will use them for the majority of the game, because they'll basically one-shot and wipe out everybody apart from whatever thing they are super weak towards. But then you end up not really building a relationship with your other Pokemon, because you're just power leveling them. And that's an issue that I didn't run into here, because I was genuinely using all the characters, and you get to learn their abilities and what combo you want to use when you want to stun somebody, or when somebody is stunned, what do you want to use to get the majority of the pie chart down. So I think they just did an absolutely fantastic job with that. And I can't applaud the game more, if I'm being honest, because the economy is just really well balanced. Now, surprisingly, I do actually want to talk about the story of Age of Calamity, because it is, honestly, it's a bit wild. You know, there's time travel, I believe it's set in a different timeline, and, you know, there's just a lot going on. Where I want to start is talking about the cutscenes, because we've never had something like this in a Zelda game. Like, you watch some of these cutscenes, especially near the end of the game, and it's honestly like you're watching a Lord of the Rings movie. There's big battles, there's hundreds of bokoblins, or, well, you know, let's be real, like 10, 15 bokoblins running towards a battlefield. But just seeing this style of storytelling in a Zelda game is just so interesting, and I find it fascinating, because, you know, you will have all the champions sitting on top of a mountain or on top of a wall or a rampart, and there's enemies running towards them, there's guardians off in the distance shooting things, and there's explosions going off everywhere. And it does seriously feel like you're watching a Lord of the Rings movie, which I think is the perfect vibe for what this game is. Like, it is literally about a war. And let's be real, I love Lord of the Rings, my favorite trilogy of movies ever. But the things that I remember from being a kid are watching, you know, Helm's Deep and seeing all the crazy stuff that's happening. And I can only imagine what it's like being a kid playing this game, because these games are simple enough that a kid definitely could play them. But I kind of wish I had a game like this when I was a kid, where I could see, you know, Link jumping around and slashing things. And it's just cool. It's as simple as that. Like I said at the start of this video, that Muso games are like comfort food. Whereas I think if you break them down too much, you will end up almost missing the point of them. And that's why I think the cutscenes are just so great, because they just understand that cool factor and that cinematic quality that Zelda, you know, there has been some cinematic cutscenes in Zelda games previously, but nothing on this level. And that's not even talking about the slower moments, because the best parts of Breath of the Wild story is when you're interacting with the champions, you're learning the backstory, but now you get to see the champions in their full glory, fighting on a battlefield and interacting with one another. And there is good banter between them, but my favorite scene from Breath of the Wild was the one with Yunubo and the Rook, and the Rook's cheering them on. I'm just like, oh, this is just top notch. And seeing them two interact with each other is just warm my heart. Again, this sort of opens up the canon question, which I'm not sure if it's ever been officially stated whether or not this is canon or not. I've genuinely never really cared about canon. I love Zelda. I've played almost every single Zelda game, and I've played Zelda consistently my whole life. Majora's Mask is the first game I ever remember playing. It was my favorite game of all time for a long time. But I've genuinely never cared about a Zelda canon or the Zelda timeline, because I'm not even sure if Nintendo care. And I kind of feel like canon is something that fans use to almost like legitimize their love for something. And I have never felt the need to do that. I have always just taken the story for what it is, or taken the story for what I take out of it. Whenever I talk about canon, I know a lot of people do care about it, and if something's non-canon, they're sort of disinterested in it. But if you look at when Disney bought out Star Wars, and there was the extended universe, and literally one statement made all the extended universe non-canon. So it's like, if some corporate statement can just make something non-canon, then why can't I just sit down and, you know, think something is part of the canon or in my own head canon? Because realistically, you know, Miyamoto and all the boys, you know, they don't care about what I think about the canon, so why can't I just invent my own canon in my own head? And that's kind of how I feel about it. So even if the story is or isn't canon, it doesn't really bother me. It's definitely some alternate timeline, and that's when you get into the time travel, which does feel a bit goofy and a bit fan fiction-y, but I just think the moments that I got out of it, with, you know, seeing Yunubo and Daruk interact with each other, I was like, yeah, this was definitely worth it, even if it does make it feel slightly goofy. So yeah, this video was 5 years in the making, and I'm really happy that I can finally say I beat Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. Now, there is some post-game stuff that, realistically, I probably won't do, because Age of Imprisonment is out in only a couple of days, and it's going to run at 60 FPS, and it, judging by the trailers, it looks really good as well, like visually, and runs really well, which is more important. So I don't know if I would want to put like another, say, 40 or 50 hours to sort of see the post-game stuff, but I did really enjoy my time with this, and it is honestly one of the best, or one of the most fun experiences, should I say, I've had on the Switch now that it's finally stable and playable. So it is a game I would highly recommend that you play. You could probably pick it up fairly cheap secondhand in a shop now, maybe not on the eShop, because games like this don't usually really get that heavily discounted, but it is definitely worth playing. So is Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition, even if that game does feel like pure fan fiction. That's just what it feels like, whereas this feels like it's its own story, it's its own game, whereas Hyrule Warriors is like, how do we apply a Hyrule Warriors skin, or a Hyrule skin, to the Warriors formula, whereas this is like, how do we make a Breath of the Wild game in Hyrule, or in the Warriors formula? And that's sort of the best way I would compare them. But yeah, just a great game. Can't wait for Age of Imprisonment. I will have video on that. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all on another video at some point. Goodbye.